It's nice to meet you all. I hope you will enjoy my little talk. I will talk about level design in Iron Harvest and what we did for making this RTS game a really cool experience. So first of all, what is Iron Harvest? Iron Harvest is a real-time strategy game. It is a classic one where you control different squads and fight off against enemies. But the key element that we got is like having big mechs fight over pretty landscapes. So you already see them here in one of our launch trailers, and the mechs are like the key feature that we have. They are destroying almost everything on their way, so like running through buildings and stuff like that. So we have a pretty dynamic battlefield, and those mechs are fighting like in different, like for different factions. We have 3 different ones, and each one has their own like little story campaign, and all of those conclude to the final big thing in the single player campaign. But also, besides single player campaign, we do have a multiplayer component, so you can battle against like your friends in skirmish matches and on different like multiplayer maps that we have. And it was our biggest project that we had, like that we were working on, and it's still an ongoing process. We're still in the like live game and working on more multiplayer maps, working on more like single player stuff, and there's still a lot of stuff that we try to get into it and try to listen to fans and all that. That's especially important for us as we launched this game with like part of a Kickstarter campaign. It was like the most successful Kickstarter campaign in Germany for a video game, and therefore we really like want to keep the connection to the fans and make the best game for them out there. So it's definitely one of our like key pillars that we have and in the development. So before I head into like the rest of the talk, maybe I just quickly go to myself as well. As already mentioned, I'm a game and level designer at King Art Games, and I'm working for Iron Harvest, and that means like I'm like was part of like some game design decisions, but also a lot of like level design decisions, especially later on, and was responsible for several missions there and some like technical stuff and workflows and stuff like that. So throughout the whole talk, I will like get some examples that I was working on and that I can share with you. And yeah, so before going into the details of like Iron Harvest, I want to go to the topic of level design. So what is level design? And that is like a huge thing that is let's say pretty like it's different to each company and to each project, and it's not always the same thing, but in general I would say it's the communication with the player and how the player interacts with the game itself, and how we as designers create this experience for the player by using like some kind of shape theory or psychology or like stories and other like interactable like elements that he or she or they can work with. So what we do as like level designers are a lot of stuff. Of course, it depends on like the project, as I said, but level design spreads out through like mission and quest design, so describing like missions, describing what the player has to do to like progress in the story. Then of course like the layout design, so what does it look like, what is the defined space that we're playing with, and then we're also like doing the blocking and the scripting of like the whole space. So this is like one of the biggest things that probably like level design contains, and that is blocking space and creating imagery that the player can interact with. And then like through the scripting, we make it interactable, we make it like fun to play with. And that is probably then like another part that is evolving out of that, and that is the encounter design and some kind of cutscene staging. So also that is part of the level design cloud, let's say, and how to set up combat, set up encounters of like the challenges of puzzles or stuff like that. It does not have to be combat, but all of those are still part of the level design theme or like model. And also, as I said, like the cutscene staging. So sometimes level designers create some like atmospheric like shows of like how the enemy approaches the player, or we introduce certain characters and want to have like a real cool story moment where sometimes the player has control, sometimes like they don't. So we tend to do a lot of work with other departments, of course, and yeah, that is all like part of the level design cube, I'd say. And to like further go down that road, level design is definitely like a huge topic in regards to getting a lot of stuff from different departments and working with those. So mainly like if I'm saying we have like sound, we have like the visual art that gets added, a lot of that stuff is not from the level designers, but we are using what we have and what we can get with the other teammates. So if I'm continuing with that, what are then the responsibilities of a level designer? So as I said, it's different to each studio and project, and I can only tell from my experience and what we are doing, and also from what I heard from other studios. So the biggest thing is the connection between the departments. So we are creating a lot of like experiences that are combined from the different departments, and by doing that, we are trying to define what actually the player is doing there, and how he can interact with the space. So in general, like those are like a few points here that are done by almost every level designer, and that is like pitching concepts of like what the player is doing and what I can imagine the level to look like or to play like. So it's a lot of yeah, placeholder assets, using what we have and trying to mock up stuff, and then presenting them to like management and other level designers, and see if we can get like some cool, interesting ways for the player to interact with the world. So that is like one part. The other part is, of course, like if you already have something as like a level design document or like another like game design document or something, then you try to implement what they're like, what it is. So if there's some kind of, let's say, description of like a dialogue tree, and then you have like a few people there standing around and in a bar or something, then you try to, of course, implement that. But as always with design, you have to iterate a lot and try to understand if something feels off or if something feels exactly right. Then we have to see if we can get the feedback loop running and iterate and make the levels great, that we try to see if our expected behavior is really what we can achieve, or if we need to adjust a lot of stuff, which happens all the time. So yeah, besides, of course, like getting the content to the right quality, we try like with the general content of the game, we try to fix and optimize all the time. So throughout the project, there will be a lot of like milestones or things that like we tend to say, okay, this is our date where we want to have more of like playtesters playing the whole game and all of that. So we tend to get several tickets through like software like Jira or something like that. And yeah, making it especially run good is another thing. So if you're trying to do like stuff for mobile or for a PC or console, you always have to make sure that it runs smoothly and that your levels are like in the same vein that other levels are. And yeah, you always have to polish that stuff and iterate. And of course, like another point is the balancing aspect, especially important for an RTS, but also for any other like combat scenario that you have in your levels. So that is not only like part of like some game design specific positions. So they are like maybe looking into the balancing of each unit in the example of like our RTS, but also we are responsible for taking a look into the balancing of like one specific mission and how many like enemies come up or something like that. And yeah, that is already like getting to the next point. But before that, I just want to show like one of the images from like a work in progress, and that is one of the like that is the first mission, so like a tutorial mission that I was responsible for. And it is like a snowball fight in a ruined like a castle ruin in a snowy area, and the player will get to learn like the combat basics and how to get in cover and use that to like to their advantage and try to attack like other like kids that are playing with snow. And yeah, in this case you can see I was just really basically putting cubes in there just to make a first like impression of what it could be. I was already like, in this case it's a transition from like the blocking and the first assets that we got, and make sure for the artist to know, hey, this green block, for example, in this case is my cover. This is where the player can go into and use the cover for attacking the enemy. And some other markings where it's like, okay, here is like tends the enemy tends to be here, so we want to have like another position and stuff like that. And then like this will be used by the level artists, and we'll create a like with really cool assets and assembles and like foliage and stuff like that. So in our case for King Art, we are having a really good relationship with the level art team, and we're always working with like a back and forth between those departments. And especially as our game is a heavy like story influenced game, and we want to have like the experience is way more important than like, let's say, the ESL like esports feeling that you could get out of an RTS as well. So therefore the importance of like making the space look good and play good is of course like a good combination of both level design and level art. And therefore for our process we were playing a lot with like really basic setups in the beginning, and like some really basics to just talk about and see if we can get any ideas from the level designers or from the level artist and combine them into something that we want to that we can envision like for the final product. So in this case, what we set up for the level design for Iron Harvest were like a few key pillars that are definitely like changing how you approach a project. And in our case, it was the cover-based infantry combat. So a lot of a lot of the time, the cover-based things are shaping your space. So in our case, if you have like a cover for your infantry, you want to make sure that like there's enough space for all of your units to really interact with the play space. And on the other side, we have mechs that can destroy environment and like can destroy buildings and stuff. So we have to make sure that that is also included in the whole, let's say, in the whole combat setup or the overall like level. And as I already said, like we have a strong focus on storytelling, so we want to make sure there are like specific, for example, specific locations where there's like dialogue going on. So we have to make sure that the player can reach that point and is not like, let's say, like skipping content that we definitely want to have in there. Of course, some stuff is like optional, and there are like other like sequences that the player can skip, but we want to make sure to hit on like those great story beats and that the player understands what's going on. Then, and that is probably the biggest, let's say, constraint that you can get in like an RTS, and that is the perspective, because it's definitely something else to excuse me. It's definitely something else to design for third-person action like adventure or stuff like that, or to design for an RTS with that top-down perspective. So that is already like constraining you in that regard, that you have to see how you can influence the player on like certain paths. So a lot of the time you cannot work with like distant goals of like towers or stuff like that, because you can't really see them. So what we had to do was working more with uh, the basic ground level, and see what we can use with like edging of certain spaces with like fences or like walls that can be used as cover as well. Of course, we are working a lot with terrain work and with vegetation, and make the space feel like either more inviting to enter, or of course like make it for like prepared for combat. So that it was one of the biggest things that we have to be aware of course, by designing for that perspective. And so in general, I already mentioned that we are like a huge like connection point where all different departments are coming in. So we are preparing a lot of design documents and pitching layouts and pitching blockouts and stuff like that. But also we are like in communication with other departments to see if we can get their like cool ideas into our concept as well, or the other way around, and try to communicate with them. Hey, we definitely need to have that like huge like explosion there, because it would be make so much more sense if like the mech would destroy that building and it looks pretty awesome and stuff like that. So we always have to work with other departments, and for that, of course, like creating lists and those concepts and stuff like that is always a part of the whole workflow as well. So here, for example, is one of the blockouts that I did for mission, and of course that one was like again a pretty like generic like blocking of just like a few cubes. It doesn't need to be much. It just like was the scaling of like the different houses. And one moment, my dog is, hey, okay. My dog was squeaking, I'm not sure. So where was I? Oh yeah, okay. So the blockouts were pretty basic, but it was like there's circles that you can see here. They were already part of like we call it like a Tesla coil. So there's like electricity like in a specific area, and we have to make sure that like some pathways are blocked and the player understands what's going on there. Um, so we are in communication with the tech department, making sure that we can get that and that we can adjust the scaling or like the transform here and there. So in overall speaking, we have like a split between like the single player missions and the multiplayer missions. Of course, our designers were working on both. And like for the single player campaign, we do have very like scripting heavy missions. So it's really like pretty linear like story going on, and you have some events that are called by the level designers, and then some combat going on here and there. But we also have AI based maps, or like an AI part. So if you play a skirmish match, there's like an AI fighting against you with different like behaviors and trying to match your like play and try to conquer stuff that you just lost or something like that. So in most missions, we try to have a combination, so making it like feel very dynamic and reactive to the player, and therefore we have like more skirmish-like maps, but also more like story-focused hero or squad missions. So, for example, like a stealth part where your hero like goes into a enemy camp, and then like there's stuff happening going, and you have to like fight off or like try to save your last units and then get reinforcements, stuff like that. In general, we have like 3 different campaigns with 7 missions, so there was a lot of stuff to do. And as I said, we are still working on some more story content. Just recently, we announced that we are releasing a new like DLC campaign that is that has 4 missions that are being released on the 17th of December, and therefore we are still like working on more stuff, and it's really cool to see what the players like can enjoy there. And yeah, in addition to our single player story content, we had additional challenge maps. So those are like specific situations in the lore of the world of 1920 plus, and they are more like a thing that you can play over and over again. So our scripting had to come up with like some like ways of keeping the player engaged in that challenge mode. And then of course like our multiplayer part was quite big as well, especially now after the release. We focused on getting more and more multiplayer maps out there, and we have like a combination, like a mix of symmetrical and unsymmetrical maps, all through like 1 versus 1 maps, 2 versus 2, or 3 versus 3 maps. So a lot of like battles going on there, especially in the 3 versus 3. And one of the biggest things that we try to add in the multiplayer as well is having like unique maps that are still fitting the whole like world and the whole lore of 1920 plus, and our narrative of like what's going on with the story, and why like some units are fighting maybe against others, or why this location has been like influenced by the like dieselpunk style industry. So we wanted to have like the like unique flair and visual look of that throughout all like multiplayer maps, but also we want to have like a variation in the distinct like play styles. So if you have like a player that is more focused on like defensive lines and trying to get in like their bunkers at certain spaces and control that area, so we want to make sure that there are like some areas in our multiplayer maps that are letting the player feel more of a defensive like force, or of course the other way around, we want to have like more open spaces where you can just like put out like the biggest mechs in your army and send them out and fight against the other player. So we do have like a lot of different things going on with the multiplayer maps and with their like approaches to the flagpoles that you can conquer. So this, for example, is one of the single player missions. It was the first one that I already mentioned. So you can already see the castle here that is at the top that I was talking about. But also, as you can see, as it is the like first tutorial mission, it is really linear, and you just have a few basic beats that you want to hit here, and the whole thing like goes on even further. But like for this part, you can see there's like one combat situation at the bottom where like the really first tutorial is starting, and then you have the castle rune, which takes it even further. So this next image is part of the multiplayer aspect, and here you can see that was a screenshot that I took with like some markings of where specific points of interest are. In this case, it was about like the resources and how we could change up the resource positions just to make sure that the gameplay flows really well, and that the player always has like some connection to the next point of interest and some like choices he can make, and that are like not only choices that are like without any doubt like better or worse, but also really influenced by the enemy and how the other player interacts with like the other point of interest. So here you can see it is like a point symmetrical map, and you want to have like a pretty like clear pathing of where like some units can go and some can't, especially if you have different sizes in your units for an RTS. On the other side, if like the mech destroys a wall, what happens, and like what if like the building is destroyed and stuff like that. So we tend to have like a setup of pathways that we think about, especially in the beginning of the blockout phase, and then start with like here with resource points or buildings that are important for the player, and like how those are connected to the pathways. So to go to the next point, I want to like go a bit more in deep with the encounter design that we have. So for our case in Iron Harvest, combat and the encounter between like infantry squads or like mechs are like really important, and therefore that was one of our like one of the biggest focus besides the story component that we want to have like really have nailed down in the specific missions. So we have a lot of different combat scenarios in our games, like in our missions, that is like conquering points of interest. So for example, flagpoles or like train stations that are like a good position for defense or stuff like that. It is more about like choosing your fights. So okay, maybe there are several points of interest, and you have to make sure, or you have to decide what is the next one that I'm willing to take if I maybe am losing another point, or maybe I can't contend with the enemy on that position. So yeah, it's always like that tactical maneuvering of units and stuff like that. So the next one would be like defending against waves. Of course, like it's a huge thing in games to defend off like enemy waves, and that is also part of what we're doing with a lot of the missions that we have. And there's even like some small stealth things going on, so you can approach like an enemy from a different like point and trying to ambush him and see if like you can fight off like most of the units at the like very first second or stuff like that. What we are working with are like different elements for each encounter, and that are like the units of the player. Most important, if we can like if we already know what they have, if they like cannot build any units by their own, then we definitely know what the current situation looks like. Then on the other side, the enemies. So we can control if the enemy is like patrolling a path or guarding like specific locations, maybe attacking the player in waves, stuff like that. Then, of course, the space itself is definitely important, and we have to make sure that it is a good flow into the combat if the player wants to interact with enemies, or of course out of the combat. So retreating your units or getting out of the dangerous zones and getting into more like refugee spaces that you can then use to gather your units and try to attack again. Then the cover positioning is really important as well. As I said, we are using a combination of like walls and other stuff that infantry units can take cover in, but of course mechs can destroy that cover, and that makes it really interesting and dynamic. Then of course there are a lot of other affordances for interactions, like resource crates that you can pick up that are like important, or like weapon systems that are that infantries can take and use and to fight off against other enemies. And here is again one of the images from the first tutorial. It is a really, like, hopefully a really good example of the basics of the combat. So we tried to set up a really clear image of what the player could do here, and so therefore there are some like cover positions around those snow walls, and some stones where the player can take cover in and attack those like those farmer boys, and yeah, make like the first iteration was of course a bit too much. We went down and tried to reduce it to the very specific situations of, okay, here's like a cover against cover. You cannot like do much because like both of you are in cover. Maybe you want to flank the enemy. Okay, let's see, there's like a wall at the bottom here that the player can take and use as a flanking position to attack the enemy. And therefore we like, those are like some situate, or let's say some models that we used for all kind of combat scenarios. So to get that like let's say combat done and make it so that the player can understand what's going on, especially especially if you want to improve like the overall experience, you definitely have to work on the visual language and understand and set up a clear communication between like the intention of the designer and the player themselves. So excuse me. So the clear communication is in our case was most important for the cover metrics. So we have a lot of like assets that are providing like either waist high cover where units can go into and fight like from that position, vault over, so jump over that like asset and then like interact with the next thing, or even like have full cover where like the enemy is not like reaching you or stuff like that. And those are definitely important to make really clear and set up some rules and some guidelines for the level artists or for like the environment artists, because you don't want to have like a wall that is looking like you could go into cover but actually is like bigger than, in our case it was 1 meter for the cover. So stuff like that can lead to confusion, and you don't want to have the player ask themselves if they can like go there and go into cover, or and then like if they try to and it's not working, then they feel frustrated. It's not really good for the overall flow and of course for understanding what's going on. The same thing goes for like really narrow paths, and especially in our case, as we have like 3 different let's say unit types of like of their scale, we want to make sure that like it's clear for the player to see if a big mech can go through a certain location or can go over a bridge or stuff like that. So definitely the same thing, you have to create buffer zones where there shouldn't be any assets, so the player understands, okay, I can go walk through this without thinking about it too much, or like delaying the whole process of like moving your units. The same thing, like without like looking at the assets, the same thing goes for the terrain and for the vegetation. So we want to make sure that those communicate if you can interact with that space, or if you can like walk over like a terrain cliff, for example, or through like a forest. And therefore we want to have like foliage and vegetation that is so dense that it's clear that the player cannot walk through it. The same thing for the terrain, that it should either be like steep, so steep that it's clear that you cannot walk through it, or you should be able to walk over it, and it has to look like that, especially from our like top-down perspective. Those go into like what we try to then set up as the map flow, especially in the beginning of the blockout. We try to create a clear communication of where the player can go and where the player can like retreat to, or try to set up defenses, and all of that is very important for the overall experience, and needs to be communicated with the level artist. And especially after like vegetation gets added and stuff like that, we need to make sure like defensive lines are clear for the player, or the flanking routes are clear for the player. And in our case, the points of interest like resource buildings and like other like combat scenarios were also very important to set up in a specific way, because we want to have like a distance that feels natural and is like a good like you can always see another cool thing to go to if you're basically done with the current thing that you did with like conquering a flag, for example, and then like there's a resource building close to it. And besides that, we also want to get into the story and the coherence of like the spaces. So even in the beginning, we are working on like how the story, what's the story of the space? Why is there like a small river, and where does this come from? Or is there like a fisher place, and where are like the farmers positioned, and why are they here? Why do they have to have a wall exactly that way? Because we want to have it for the combat, but also like what does it make sense with like the environment and the storytelling that we want to share. And then we give a lot of identity to our spaces. So the like, for example, the farmer thing that I was talking about, you want to have a clear communication of like a farming house with maybe a few like grass patches here and there, but there's like a huge, let's say, like a woodcutter, like a lumberjack place and stuff like that. All those things that should be really clear for the player, so the player can understand where he is and where he's located, and understand where he needs to head. So it's always easier to communicate, especially for multiplayer maps. It's very important to communicate where you are located and where you have to like send out units. For example, if you're playing with your like a co-op partner, you want to explain them, hey, go to the like lumberyard, like lumberjack place, and then they have to know where it's located. And the next thing would be then clear mission goals. So really make sure that those stand out. So for example, hey, you want to conquer not only like just like an area, but you want to conquer the train station that is like the only train station here in this place. So it's pretty clear what's going on there. And yeah, I think in general, like all of those things went into the whole process like very early on. We try to get most of that done like in the first like blockouts, and try to make it understandable for the level artists and for like creative director and the leads and stuff like that. So it's they can already see what we want to do, but also like once like other departments come into play, we have to have those being checked like all the time and see if the mission goal is still clear, if the space is understandable from like all positions. What if like the player rotates the camera and cannot see the enemy, and what can we do with like setting up cutscenes and stuff like that. We always have to iterate and like check those different like elements that I was talking about and see if they are still working and fun, of course. So I think in general that is what we did for Iron Harvest, and in general what we try to set up for like all our missions. And yeah, I think I'm done here. If you have any questions, then I guess we have a few minutes to talk about those. You can find more about Iron Harvest at our homepage, and of course, you can find our like studio site at kingart-games.com. We are like mostly all of the times looking for like internships and jobs and stuff. So if you're interested, you can take a look at that. Of course, like now with Corona going on, it might be a bit tricky with the internship. I'm not sure, but I think we're still hiring interns. Yeah. Okay, I just got the confirmation. Yes, we are still hiring interns, so that's a good thing. And we are still hiring other for other positions as well. I think right now we're looking for someone with QA experience, and yeah, if you want to be connected with me, you can definitely hit me up on LinkedIn, but also just on Twitter. I think I added that here. So just on Zwack, that's it. So yeah, thank you all very much. And yeah, if you have questions, then I think we can go on and go to them.
Awesome. Thank you very much, Justin, for the nice talk. I was really looking forward to this because, like, in the beginning of the year, Iron Harvest was one of the big German games on the Steam market with Destroy All Humans, and you really crushed some numbers, so that was awesome. And thanks for the insight. I already posted some of the links, like your LinkedIn and the King Art Games homepage, in the chat, so feel free to check that out. And we already got a whole lot of questions. From the beginning of the talk.
Awesome.
And yeah, I will now read them. We will just start with the first question. If any of the persons who asked those questions wants to speak for themselves, just unmute yourself and do that. Otherwise, I will just read them to you. So the first question, Justin, is by Marcus. It is, how does your personal creative approach look when it comes to designing a level and its layout?
In general, I think like as already said, like it's a pretty personal thing, and all of our designers are working differently. But for me, and for like a lot of other designers as well, or we are working first of all with 2D layout of the space. Let's say to start the whole thing, we are communicating with our we are talking with our creative director and with our lead about like the mission and what the mission contains, what the story beats are, and what the player can do basically. So that is something that we already have in some kind of level design document, and then we use it for our 2D layout image. That is like in the beginning just rough sketches, like sketches on paper, and then to make it presentable, we are working with like software like Photoshop or stuff like that to just or create the version that we can show off with other departments and talk about. And then pretty soonish we jump into the engine and block out the whole thing. What's a bit like interesting in regards to Iron Harvest that, or to RTS games, is that we do not have a lot of verticality. So therefore, like 2D layout images are even more important in the beginning and more useful because you don't have to worry that much about like verticality. But on the other side, once you are back in the once you're in the engine, you definitely want to add that verticality in to make the spaces look more interesting and see if you can like block off certain paths because of that verticality. But yeah, we tend to work a lot with level artists. So for me personally, like the first thing that I want to do is create a list of things that I think could work and sketch out on the paper some ideas, and then talk with level artists about those, just as a heads up of what I want to do, and then just doing the block out, mark certain spots where I need to like communicate with other departments and iterate a lot. So yeah.
Really interesting. So how does the next question would be by Martin and by Michael. They ask quite similar questions. It is like, how do you go with designing a level? Is it that you go back and forth between gameplay, game design, and then level design? Or is it that you, for example, first of all get the game design and the gameplay, which needs to be included, and then start with the level design?
I think it's a mixture, especially as like we at KingArt, we do have like two different departments, one for like the game design department, one for the level design department, and game design is more focused on like the overall like gameplay of like the units and what they can do and stuff like that, which is also influenced by the mission documents that we have. So let's say a specific hero unit, in our case, like for example, one of our heroes, Anna, has like a ranged sniping shot, precision shot. So that was already clear and set up in the documents, and of course then like being used for all departments. But like what the actual level design mission contains is then something that we as level designers are more focused on. And if we need some like more specific like interactions, for example, there should be a gate because we want to block off the player for the beginning, but then you can interact with something and the gate opens up, and that is all stuff that is not like really like planned from the game designers, but more from like the perspective of a level designer creating that experience. And therefore then we are working close together with like the tech department, with like tools programmers that are working with us on the scripting like environment and creating those actions that we can use.
And how early are you, like, how early do you become part of the overall loop of designing? Like, yeah.
Can you repeat? Sorry.
How early do you become part of the loop? Like, do people first of all block out, like, does the game designers, for example, block out the overall level idea and then ask you to really build a level out of that? Or is it that you are really doing the concept together with them?
So in the case of Iron Harvest, most of the stuff, especially for the early missions, were already set up by our creative director. So like he already had like a vision of what the story should be and what it, like how it could play out. But as soon as like you get like one mission, let's say like onto your plate, you would then talk with your lead and with the creative director about some ideas and how we could maybe change some stuff around. So even then, like early in that process where it's just about basically some descriptions of what the space might be, we are already in the position of like talking about changing stuff if it's necessary. Of course, we don't change for the sake of it, but if we do have like cool ideas, and if we tend to believe some things are just not working with how like some units have developed over time, because maybe you have a description that is like pretty old of like a mission, and all the units have changed their behavior because reasons, then you always have to like iterate and see if we can adjust stuff.
Okay, Sebastian, you already talked about a bit of the technical side, and Sebastian already had like a question regarding to that. So, to which degree do the performance measurements dictate your creative process?
So yeah, it's a big thing, of course, like the performance and like the optimization work and stuff like that. But in general, we tend not to let us influence too much, especially in the beginning, about that stuff, because we want to get those ideas out and see if we can make it work, and then talk with like programmers and see if there's like solutions that are just like more valuable. Of course, there are some things that are just like set up in the beginning that we cannot change, and those should be like, there should definitely be some kind of like document where it states what the constraints are. Like in our case, it was pretty clear that we have like those different units, and those need to have like 3 different sizes, and our navigation system works with those 3 different sizes, and we cannot that easily add another size to it. Or we cannot, for example, as the navigation in our case is pretty like 2-dimensional, we cannot make like units walk under other units and stuff like that. So there's like a bridge, for example, is something that we are constrained to just use like basically from one point, and not like from multiple angles. So there are a lot of like technical constraints that we cannot like combat and like tackle. But on the other side, if it's about the creative vision of your mission, you shouldn't be like feel in any way like that you're too constrained about like your ideas, and therefore we are just working on getting those ideas down, like either on paper or like into the engine, and talk with our different departments and see if we can make it work. So one thing that I did, because I was responsible for the boss design and for the last mission, there was a lot of stuff going on there that was very specific and very special, and there were some units that we have that were not as usual like as others, and they all needed to have like special important, or let's say like other variations of how they interact with the player, and therefore in the vision of the boss design has changed quite a lot, because there are some constraints and there are things that needs to be done in other ways. So it's always like trying to get that vision out, trying to see what we can achieve, and then adjust as you go.
Really nice. Thanks for the insight. Marcus got another question about what are some differences when it comes to level design for a top-down RTS versus, for example, a 2D game?
Ooh, 2D game. Yeah, there's quite a lot, I guess. So like the perspective is like the biggest thing. So you definitely you definitely want to see what you can do with the perspective of like a 2D game, and if you can already like communicate the goals in a different way, then of course, for example, with RTS, you have like a mini map that it shows you at least like where you should be heading, or you can like create the pathways that you look from top down. In a 2D game, you would still have like the same thing of like showing the path and showing the goal in any way. Maybe it's just like going from left to right, like Mario style. That's one way. or you have to like use the same like clear communication of the metrics. That is, I guess, a similar thing from any game. So you have to set up a clear communication of how the player can interact with your space, like 2D scrolling thing where you jump over gap, and the gap needs to be adjusted in a way and that it is clear that the player can land on that platform or not. um, but it's the same thing for like the RTS, where it needs to be clear that the player can move their units across the space or not. So yeah.
Got it. The next question would be by Fabian. How many references from other games or real life events did you use for creating the map flow, or did you create your game through your own ideas and testing?
We we're using a lot of like references, and like first of all, like the whole game is the whole game is part of like a world created by a Polish artist, and so we have a lot of influences from the artist itself, but also from like real life events that we want to like get included into the whole story. So like with the what's it called, like the Kaiserreich, and like stuff like that. There's a lot of stuff going on. Of course, other games like other RTS games, Company of Heroes, StarCraft, World of Warcraft has a great like story component. So we always had like we're thinking about different references, even like movies, all that stuff. So yeah, of course, like own ideas and a combination of references.
Awesome. So when it comes to your general industry pathway, Mikhail asked, Justin, how did you become a level designer and got the job you're doing right now?
So I like studied media informatics, and then like had to do an internship, and as I was a bit lucky, let's say, that like I got um, recommended as a game design intern for King Art. I got the internship there and was like working on another project, working there as a game designer, but also already doing in that like it was a pre-production that we were doing, and also so already there I was doing a bit of a mixture between game design and level design. And then as like later on I had to write my bachelor thesis, which was about boss design, which I was able to write in combination with working for King Art Games. So I could create like my boss design thesis and design the boss design, like design the boss encounter for Iron Harvest. And therefore I moved more into like from the game design more into the level design aspects. And yeah, it was just like some natural like movings for the project needs, you could say. So yeah, that's how it worked.
Were there any like relations in your university or during your studies with media informatics where you had to do like game design task, or are you self-taught in that area?
Like like our university had like strong focus on like video game development, and it was like the University of Applied Sciences in Mittweida, which tends to do a lot of like practical like learnings, you could say. So we did had a lot of like broad knowledge of every like department of like everything. Like every department has their modules and stuff that we learned there. But then with the practical projects, we were learning and specializing in our like own like regards and our own fields. And especially like the last final project was, I guess, the biggest thing that made me specialize more and more into the design aspect. And that was our big project with over 60 students together on one game. and like I was lucky enough to be the like some kind of game director and lead game level designer, so there was a lot of stuff to learn in that like process.
Yeah, sounds pretty interesting. Building a game with 60 persons during your studies. That's crazy.
Yeah, it was crazy.
Okay, yeah, one more question by Martin. In aspect of game balancing, um, do you and how do change areas if balancing is needed? Okay, so how do you change stuff if needed during game balancing? Do you do playtests and adjust afterwards, for example? Or how does that work for you?
Yeah, so a lot of the stuff is like just with playtesting. So we playtest our own stuff. We playtest the stuff from other designers. We have like external people playtest our stuff, and our creative directors playtesting our stuff. So everybody, everybody is just testing and like writing feedback or like creating bug tickets, stuff like that. And then we like go on and try to see if we can like first of all analyze the problem and really make sure that we understand what the actual problem is, because for example like feedback from most players, let's say, is not always like they don't always have the right clue on what the actual problem is. So we need to understand how to solve the whole like issue that they have, um, and yeah, see if we can rearrange like some cover positions, for example, if that is already fixing the issue, or if it's just like communicating that like the pathway needs to be better visible from a specific angle or stuff like that. So yeah.
Okay, and Martin got another question he wanted to ask by himself.
Yeah, because it's a little bit longer. Specifically about the game. Um, in one of the campaign missions of Saxony, you have this very long line of defense where if you have you yeah, for the rest it's not that interesting, because you have little points where you get your resources and they are stretched on the whole south side of the map, and you hop there with your little base. And the most difficulty of the game, especially in this mission, for me came from that I could not produce enough units to do both, to attack or defend this whole area. Um, and it was never especially shown how your unit limit was implemented, because some factions in the campaign had less units and then more, and the Russian had a lot more, but they had bigger mechs. How do you balance this? Because this was a point for me to nearly quit the game, because in the end I really cheesed the game and built just enough units and also attacked in one direction and did it again and again and again and again until I got every building, and the KI didn't rebuild the building. So normally I had no chance. If it would be another player, I had no chance to get across this map. If you know what I mean. Was this intentionally? Did you want to make this Grubenkamp feeling?
So yeah, we definitely have like different like experience throughout the whole like campaign, and one thing that is pretty like obvious as a like reference to other like let's say to other warfare is like the fight of like fighting against something but not really getting there, and like trying to keep your sight basically clear and then like move slowly and creeping throughout the whole battlefield. So that is definitely one thing that we try to set up in different missions. um of course, like sometimes it was maybe not working for all players, and it's in some situations you definitely want to have like more focus on like the casual part, or more the harder like hardcore RTS players. And I think especially like the Saxony campaign, for example, as it is the last campaign, was way more challenging in a lot of the missions. So that is probably one of the reasons why it felt so difficult. Um, but at least like from what I understood, I mean, I was not responsible for that mission, but that like creeping feeling of like trying to get there, but it's just like not working. Maybe is definitely at least like some kind of element that we as a level designer can use to make the progress that you then like if you can manage to do it way more like impactful and even more rewarding than just to be able to do it from the very beginning.
Awesome. Are there any more questions? Anyone who wants to ask a question by himself or herself or any of that?
I mean, in general, you can always like hit me up if you have any other questions, and just write me via Twitter or LinkedIn, or get me any like email or stuff like that. So yeah.
Awesome. I also just posted your Twitter in the chat, so everyone can do that. Just hit him a follow. And yeah, so maybe one last thing which might be interesting for some, when it comes to applying for an internship or job position at King Art Games, is there anything you would recommend people to specifically look at?
So I guess in general, like for any like department, you can definitely just try to apply. You shouldn't worry if there is not like anything written out. You can just like do a general application and see if it's still like working. We're always looking for like good people. Why shouldn't we? And therefore that is one thing. On the other side, if you like are thinking about applying to our company, think about like how to present your work in the best way, and especially like as I'm coming from design, make sure that your design intentions are clear even with your application. So if you have like a portfolio stuff, make sure that what you show is the best work, and do not like add every like student project or stuff like that. But make sure that you have very cool things going on, and clearly communicate what you did there and what other people did there. And if you have like some other like experience from like game jams or personal projects, go at them. It's always good to see that you're doing stuff like outside of like your student projects. And yeah, if you have like a shipped game that can be downloaded, is of course great. If like you shouldn't like think that like if you send that out and like every one is playing your game or like looking through like the big 100 pages document or stuff like that. But if you have like a short video clip of what's going on or some gifs of like what you designed, is always like way better. It's still of course good to have them, like have your let's say art bible or like your lore stuff written somewhere that I could interact with, and if I want to, I can take a look at the game and download it. But if it's just like a short summary of what you did and what the game is about, then it's always good to have like video or like gifs. So that is definitely something I would recommend.